Since there's so much on this subject in the media, we can almost not escape it anywhere in our everyday life. I felt it was appropriate also to bring it to church, because I think our churches should also have something to say on this subject. Our Bible text, which we read in Songs of Solomon, talked about little things, the little foxes that spoil the tender grapes. So often little things cause big problems. Little things can be very, very dangerous. We're not going to focus entirely on COVID-19, but I would like to focus on something that is more dangerous than COVID-19. Something very small, something very invasive, something very deadly, infectious and contagious. But before we do that, and we may make this 2 or 3 part studies, we would like to focus a little bit on COVID-19 just to understand how viruses work. And then we will make a correlation between this and something far more dangerous. Something that we don't hear in the media. We hear a little in the church, not too much, because it is an unpopular subject. It is something churches don't want to talk much about. I don't know why, especially when it's so dangerous, when it's so deadly, but it happens to be the case. It could be an unpleasant subject, but looking at the etymology of a virus, from the Latin, it's referred to something poisonous, a poison, or something that's noxious, like a liquid or something slimy. Now, COVID-19, yes, poisonous. I don't know about liquid and slimy, but that's what the word virus means. And when we look at, and this is not very, very long ago, this is February 28th, just a week ago yesterday, this was the distribution in the world, and this was how many cases were in China. And just a week later, in 1 week from that previous picture, this is the numbers now as of yesterday. 100,000 plus. 3,400 that have died. And these are all of the countries here that now have been infected. So obviously something very invasive. And dare I say, everyone, more or less, or most everyone, is very concerned. Another map showing where it finds itself. Now, viruses are microscopic organisms. They exist almost everywhere on the earth. And they can affect or infect almost everything. Animals, plants, fungi, and even bacteria are vulnerable to viruses. So they're everywhere, and they can affect almost every living thing. Now, from this list, I don't see too many exceptions. Rocks, maybe not rocks or things like that, but living things, plants, everything. And sometimes viruses can cause deadly diseases that can even be fatal. And other times, they don't cause anything quite so serious, and they have different effects on different things. Now, they may infect a dog, but they may not infect a cat. They may infect a certain plant, but not another animal. But what makes them very unique is, of course, they have genetic material, RNA and DNA, but they cannot replicate in and of themselves. They can't do that. They can't replicate. So how can they be everywhere? How can they infect everything? How can they do that? Well, they are parasitic. That means they need a host. They need somebody else or something else to, shall we say, to infuse or to enter into in order that they can replicate. That's how they multiply. So they are parasitic. And they are considered the most abundant biological entity on the face of the earth. Now allow all of these concepts to come into your mind, because COVID-19 isn't the most dangerous thing. But it operates, this virus, just the same way as the deadly virus I'm going to share with you. They're very small. They're not big. They're about 100 times the size of a bacteria. So a bacteria is already small, and a virus is even smaller. You cannot see them with a naked eye. You cannot see them with a light microscope. You need an electron microscope in order to see them. That's how small they are. So they have genetic material. They've got a protein coat that protects them, and they have a little envelope, and this is how they are. So a virus does not contain what is called a ribosome. A ribosome is that entity within a cell that allows protein to be made. They don't have that. They've got the DNA, they've got the RNA, they've got the map or the recipe for who they are, but they need somebody else or something else to multiply them. So they cannot reproduce without a host. Now they can spread from person to person. Right? That's why everybody's so worried about COVID-19. They can spread from person to person. And that's why, there's a concern for personal space. Everybody wants to have a little bit more personal space. You don't want to get too close to people anymore. I wonder what that's going to do to church and church attendance. You don't want to get too close to people. You have to have about a 6-foot space. About 6 feet. Some say 3, but more like 6. A little bit bigger space. And the way that they infect people is, people cough, people sneeze. There can be droplets of moisture, in the air. And if you're close enough, then these droplets can come into contact with a human. And of course, the portal of entry is usually that T space. That's why you're not supposed to now, according to CDC, NIH, World Health Organization, you're not supposed to touch the T space of your face too often, which, by the way, on average is done about 24 times an hour. We touch our faces, the T space, about 24 times per hour. So they come in through the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and it can also be by touching. So we touch things. We touch them, and then we touch our face with unwashed hands. And so they enter. Now let's look at how the virus works. I apologize that this slide is not the clearest slide that I could find. But as we will go through this here, we will see here to point number 1. The virus, which is very small, about 100 times smaller than a cell, comes to a cell here. This could be cell in your respiratory tract or whatever organism this virus is affecting, species specific. It enters in here and it releases its RNA or DNA material into the cell. And as this RNA invades into the cell, it does something. It takes over the nucleus of that cell. It takes it over. And what does it do? It makes that cell and the ribosomes that are within that cell, uses it to create new RNA and assemble more viral particles. Interesting. It comes into a cell, it almost takes it like hostage, and then it uses what it's lacking, the ribosomal material within that cell, to replicate, not that cell, but itself within that cell. Uses it to replicate. The replication process is extensive, is vast, and often results in the death of that cell because it wears it out. And then what does it do? All of these new viral particles, little viruses, are released from that cell that acted as its host and there are more viruses. This is how it works. And because of this fact that it is destructive to the cells that it invades, and because it replicates so furiously and so fast, people that work around these situations, and these are pictures you have seen, they have PPE, personal protective equipment. They have a face shield, they have helmets, they have gloves, they have all of these things. Why? Why do they have all of this? They don't want to get infected by the virus, because the virus can be deadly. The virus can be deadly. It can kill you. So they have all of this protective equipment to protect themselves. And when we go and look at public spaces, and these are pictures from Korea and from China, we see that even individuals seek to protect themselves by wearing face masks. So much so that it's my understanding that now you can't buy these things. A lot of places, you know, maybe a painter, maybe painters, there are people that actually need these things. There are healthcare providers that need these things. But the public is so concerned about this virus. This virus is what? Deadly. This virus is deadly. They're so worried about this virus that they're buying up all these masks and all this protective equipment, maybe not to the extent of physicians, to protect themselves from this virus. When they come, especially in close contact, buses, airplanes, airports. And this virus, I said, was what? Deadly. How deadly? How deadly? Does everybody who gets it die? You remember that slide I showed earlier? There are 55,000 people that are actually recovered out of those 100,000. How deadly is it, approximately? Oh, 2.3, 3%. Okay? So it's not 100% deadly, but it's dangerous, isn't it? And because of that, nobody wants to get it. Let me share with you a virus that is more deadly than that. It is 100% deadly. 100%. Not 2.3, not 3%. It is 100% deadly. And in our study over the next couple of weeks or so, we want to look at this virus, how it operates exactly like a virus, what might be the personal protective equipment you might need, what is the vaccine, and what is the cure. This virus actually has a cure, and it has a vaccine. The other virus does not have yet a vaccine, and the treatment, we can't say, is a cure, but it isn't 100% deadly. And this particular virus, I would like to introduce it to you. The World Health Organization, when they look at these diseases, they take a while and they very appropriately pick the name. Did you know that? They didn't just pick the name COVID-19 just out of their hat. They wanted to be sensitive to people. They didn't want to label it with anything that could hurt anybody. So the World Health Organization chose COVID, corona, virus, disease, 2019. That's how the name came to be, because that's the way the virus is, and that's the year it happened. This virus I'm going to talk to you originated in Eden. And I have chosen this title also specific as to where and when it happened. COVID Eden. The COVID Eden virus was first transmitted to human beings in the Garden of Eden, where we read in Genesis 3:6, and when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eye, and a tree to be desired, to make one wise, she took, what did she do? Touched. Of the fruit, and did eat. What does that mean? Ingest. and gave it also unto her husband. What did she do? Contaminate, pass on the virus. And he did eat. And what did God say about doing that? About contracting the COVID Eden virus? In the day that you do this, you will surely die. Did Adam and Eve die? Yes, they did. And human beings since that time have been dying and continue to die because of COVID Eden. But there is hope. How fast did this virus spread? I shared with you in 1 week the spread, the countries. COVID virus spread from Eden very quickly. As a matter of fact, when you go just from Genesis 3 to Genesis 6, you see that already the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that what? Every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil, what? Continually. How invasive is this virus? How infectious is it? How contagious is it? It makes COVID-19 look like nothing. This condition makes COVID-19 look like nothing. It's not serious by comparison. And yet how much emphasis, how much consideration, how much study and research, how many billions of dollars are being spent on treating this, understanding this, finding out what the vaccine is for this and the treatment, and what protective protection you need. Do you see or know of much going on in that regard? I am disturbed when I see so much emphasis on COVID-19 and so little on things in this world that affect our lives that are far more dangerous, far more deadly, far more devastating, and much more infectious. Let's make a little bit of a comparison between these two here that I have put together for you. A virus comparison between COVID-19 and COVID Eden. Okay? The one is in the news every day. The other one is hardly talked about too much. Spread by animals to humans, right? In China, it has been determined that it was spread from animals to humans. COVID Eden was spread from who? Animal. Animal was the vehicle. What was it? The serpent. Spread to human. Who was the human? Eve. Highly contagious, both. I would suggest to you that COVID Eden is more contagious. It spreads between people. Both of them do. Mouth, nose, eyes. COVID Eden entered, touched the mouth, hands. Many countries, COVID-19. But COVID Eden is every human being on the face of this earth. Treatment, COVID-19, no exact yet recognized treatment. COVID Eden, the blood of Christ. The death rate about 2.3, and the death rate for COVID Eden, 100%. The COVID Eden virus operates in the same manner as all viruses do. It enters in, it takes its subject hostage, and then it uses its subject to replicate and infect others. I love the statement that John Calvin said. He said, the human heart is an idol factory. See, once sin comes in, it replicates. It doesn't just stay there. It replicates and affects others. Here is the context from which John Calvin's statement is taken. The human mind, stuffed as it is with presumptuous rashness, dares to imagine a God suited to its own capacity, as it labors under dullness, nay, is sunk in the grossest ignorance. It substitutes vanity and empty phantoms in the place of God. To these evils another is added. The God whom man has thus conceived inwardly, he attempts to embody outwardly. The mind in this way conceives the idol, and the hand gives birth to it. Hence, we may infer that the human mind is, so to speak, a perpetual forge of idols. This is how the COVID Eden virus works. It is these little sins, so common that they are often unnoticed, that Satan uses in his service. What are we talking about? Little foxes, little sins. We're not talking about big sins. Was that a big sin? Yes, but it was a very little sin what Eve did. It was a little sin. She picked a fruit. The fruit looked edible. It looked delicious. It was pleasing. Maybe looked tasty. Partook and shared it. It is these little sins, so common, that they are often unnoticed. Viruses, I shared with you, are the most prevalent thing on the face of the earth. There are viruses all over, all the time, all around us. There's more people die from flus. Tens of thousands of people die from flus every flu season. And yet COVID-19 is getting a lot of... there's a lot of talk in churches about big things. Sometimes what we label as big things, important things. I would like to share with you the little things. The little things are important too. It's the little things that who uses? Satan uses. How are they? Common things. Everyday things. So uncommon, so common that they appear not dangerous at all. Not dangerous at all. Whatever have been the little sins indulged will ruin the soul unless they are overcome. The small sins will swell. See, that's what happens when the virus gets into the cell. That cell blows up and pours out all kinds of poisonous, destructive things. That's how small sins are. The small sins will swell into great sins. Then the list goes on. Impure thoughts, private impure actions, and so on and so forth. All of these things. Little things. It is one of Satan's most... What's that word? I should have highlighted. Successful devices to lead men to the commission of what? Little sins. To blind the mind to the danger of, what is that word? Little indulgences. What is the next word? Little digressions from the plainly stated requirements of God. Friends, it is the little foxes that spoil the grape. It is the little coronavirus 19 that everybody is worried about. But these little sins, skipping down, eat out the life of godliness in the soul. What does the virus do when it gets inside that healthy cell? It eats it up. It takes it hostage. It uses all of the mechanisms of the cell for its own good, for its own replication, ending in the destruction of that cell for the purpose of the virus. That's how sin works. Sins are viral, friends. Sins are viruses, and they are deadly. These little sins eat out the life of the godliness of the soul. The feet which enter upon a path diverging from the right way are tending toward the broad road that tends and ends in death. It is those little things. It is the supposed little sins that will exclude us from heaven. Oh, that statement. I don't know that we realize that. We always look at, oh, it's the big things. The big things. You know, Sabbath. Yeah, Sabbath. The state of the dead. The three angels' message. The gospel. Righteousness by faith. A lot of big things. These things are very important. But look at this statement. We don't want to miss the little things. It is the supposed little sins that will exclude us from heaven. We cannot carry with us a part of our sinful selves. See, in heaven there will be no COVID Eden. No virus is going to enter there. It has to be dealt with here. The gospel has not abolished the law or detracted one tittle from its claims. It still demands holiness in every part. There is no such thing as making the law void through faith in Christ. The law is the echo of God's own voice, giving every soul the invitation, come up higher. Be holy, holier still. Oh, friends, I want to share with you, and then we'll probably end the study with a few references along this line and continue it another time, where we will explore further the sin disease issue. I would like to share with you now a search on the greatest dangers from the spirit of prophecy that Ellen White has penned for our consideration, because we want to be concerned about dangerous things, not just 2.3% stuff, but things that are really dangerous. When it's greatest, what does that mean? That means it's like number one. It's on the top of the list. Okay, this one taken from Testimony Volume 1. These are perilous times for the Church of God. And the greatest danger now is that of what? Self-deception. You see, I don't want to diminish in any way the Sabbath. I don't want to diminish the state of the dead. I don't want to diminish any of our wonderful Advent beliefs, the pillars of our faith. But I don't know that a lot of those are really our greatest danger. At least in the search that I did, they didn't come up. The greatest danger is what? Self-deception. Is that big or little? Does that hide really small and inside places? Is that really destructive? Is it small? Very small. Doesn't show. Doesn't show. At least initially. Look at this statement. I'll just focus on the highlight because we don't have time to read. But you can read them in your context if you wish. The greatest danger is from worldly conformity. Worldly conformity. Leaning towards the world. You dislike reproof and correction. You know, in churches there's very little reproof and correction anymore. At least not from the pulpit. Everything is about being happy, about being prosperous, about wonderful things, but not about reproof and correction. It's a danger. One of the greatest curses of our world is, as I skip down, the love of supremacy. That reminds me of something. What does that remind you of? Wasn't that the original problem? Lucifer, what did he want to be? He wanted to be like the Most High. He wanted to be like God. He wanted to be God. That's very deceptive. That's very dangerous. And that is a problem in churches today. She says further down, this spirit has manifested itself among the ranks of Sabbath keepers. Sabbath keepers. I believe in the Sabbath. And I believe of its importance. But you know, Sabbath keepers can be infected by the virus of supremacy. I want to be bigger than you. I want to be in control. I want to be greater than you. Sabbath keepers. This grieved the servant of the Lord. This is a great danger. The greatest dangers. Our greatest dangers. It is not the opposition of the world that will endanger us the most. Let me read that again. It is not the opposition of the world that will endanger us the most. The evil cherished in the hearts of professed Christians works out most grievous disaster and retards most the progress of God's cause. What retards most the progress of God's cause? There is no surer way of weakening ourselves in spiritual things than by being, these are little things, but they're big, envious, suspicious, fault-finding, or evil surmising. This is a great danger. Those who are living in these last days, is that talking to us today? Are in the greatest danger of placing their confidence in men. Placing their confidence in men. These are dangerous things for our time. The greatest danger of the world is the sin that does not appear sinful. Are there more and more sins becoming that way, coming under that label, are being labeled that way? Oh, you know, in the times in which we're living now today, that was in Ellen White's time. That was in the time of the children of Israel. But today, we're living in a different time. The greatest danger of the world is the sin that does not appear sinful. The greatest danger of God's ancient people arose from their inclination to disregard His direct requirements. What were we studying in our lesson today? Are those dangers for us today? Are we in danger of not following God's direct requirements? We want to follow them, but we don't want to follow them that way. We want to follow them a little bit differently. The indulgence, backsliding, and degeneracy of our churches may be traced in a great degree to the lax sentiments which have been coming in as a result of conformity to the world. The Sabbath is not as sacredly regarded as it should be, and it goes on. So, the sin virus. We're wanting to, in following studies, look at the vaccine and the personal protection, equipment and devices that we can use to protect ourselves from these great dangers. We want to look at these. And I think I would like to conclude with just a little bit here and then an uplifting text to wrap it up, so we are not depressed as we leave. This is a wonderful Bible verse for our protection, for our encouragement, and I believe for our peace. What does it say? And this is something we take in. Thy word have I hid in mine heart, that I might not, what? Sin against thee. Is this something for the sin problem? Is this something that helps for the virus that started in the Garden of Eden, COVID Eden? I believe it is. This is something exactly for that. And we will go on and look at personal protection devices for the sin virus and so forth. And, you know, a lot of wonderful things. So come back another Sabbath, Lord willing, and we will further explore this. May I leave you with this reference from the Spirit of Prophecy that I hope will give you peace in this troubled world. What is the defense of God's people at this time? It is a living connection with heaven. if we would dwell in safety from the noisome pestilence, if we would be preserved from danger seen and unseen, we must hide in God. We must secure the protection and the protecting care of Jesus and holy angels. In these days of peril, the Lord would have us walk before Him in humility. Instead of trying to cover our sins, the virus of sin, He would have us confess them as Joshua confessed the sins of ancient Israel. We profess to be the depositaries of God's law. We profess to be building up the old waste places and to be raising up the foundations of many generations. If this great and solemn work has indeed been committed to us, how important that we depart from all iniquity. May God add His blessing to the study of His word. Amen.